Hey guys, welcome back to Ironside Ranch. We have a lot to talk about. We've missed a couple days, so let's get into this. We've got the Freedom Convoy, we got hog prices going up, and cattle prices going up. We're going to talk about everything here and kind of leave our cards on the table. Okay. So first off, let's talk about the Freedom Convoy. Whether you agree with the cause, disagree with the cause is not really relevant. You should agree with the fact that people are allowed to peacefully protest, and the fact that we're using tyrannical government tactics to control that is scary. What scares me the most is the fact that they're now trying to confiscate the cryptocurrencies and stuff like that, which is just tangible property, right? So even the governments define these as property, not as currency, which means it's actually the exact same thing as in coming in there and confiscating your cars, your houses, anything like that, just because they want to and because they somehow decided to deem you as terrorists. So it's really disgusting stuff. It's really quite scary, tyrannical, and horrible, and indicative of much, much larger problems. So what can we do? Well, obviously you can vote. And there's three ways to vote, and you oftentimes don't realize this. We always think about the first one where we just go to the polls, but the other two ways that you have that vote that matter is being on a grand jury and being on a jury. And we don't think about it, but that jury is there to decide whether a law is actually constitutional and whether that person is guilty of a constitutional law. So that juror in that instance has more authority than the judge, than the prosecutor, than the legislators that enacted the laws. And so at that point in time, that's our largest chance to vote and to really have that vote count, because instead of being one of 350 million, you're now one of 12. And so we oftentimes forget that part of our responsibility as a jury is to ignore the judge when he says you have to do it by this law. We have to look at it and say, okay, was this law constitutional in the first place? And if it's not, then we as a jury have an obligation to make it to return a not guilty verdict, regardless of whether the person actually committed the crime. It's a really interesting concept. So you have three ways to vote, and we don't ever think about this, but that's where we gain some power back on these issues. And so if we start seeing this in the U.S. and we start seeing people getting held on trial for being a quote-unquote terrorist when all they were doing was peacefully protesting, and we let everybody else go that was burning cities and killing people, at that point in time, we have a responsibility as a jury to say, this guy's not guilty of committing these acts that they're trying to prosecute him on. And so that's your most powerful vote, and that's something to realize. The other thing that we can realize is we can prepare a little bit for overstep of government, right? So overstep of government in the U.S. historically, we've gotten pretty good control back of it, right? So even when the government tends to overstep, the people push back, the courts push back, and the legislators push back, and we eventually get it back under control. But there's this lag time in here where we tend to lose control for a brief period of time, and that's actually the scary part, that elasticity of that, and that allows, if they push that far enough and there's not enough pushback, that's where you get, dictatorships and socialists and communism start coming into play, fascism, that sort of thing. And that's where we actually start seeing that historically. And so the fight back against that is, for one, to make sure that we're pushing back early and often, and that we've kind of drawn our line in the sand and said, we're not appeasing anymore on this. We're going to push back legally through our legislators, through our votes, but we are going to push back on this. The next thing to do is to prepare for that period of elasticity, right? So we know that we've probably got hyperinflation coming, possibly deflation, possibly stagflation, and certainly superinflation, maybe hyperinflation, but certainly superinflation. And so and that's going to be a tool that's used against us, as it always is. And so we have some ways that we can prepare for that. One is we can get our cryptocurrencies off the servers using things like the ledgers, and getting your cryptocurrencies into a hardware wallet that we can then store securely, either in a safe or, in better yet, a hidden location that only you know, but have reasonable access to, not a safety deposit box. Same thing with our gold and silver, because even if we think, okay, gold and silver are never going to become currencies, to a certain extent they will, because I know a number of business owners that I work with, including ourselves, that would accept gold and silver depending on the legal issues. And there's several states where you can use gold and silver as legal currency. That's a whole other issue that I'm not an expert enough to get into. I'd love, if somebody is an expert on how that works, I'd love to get them on the channel and actually discuss that. So shoot me an email, ironsideranchllc@gmail.com. I would really like to talk to you about that. If somebody out there has some legal expertise in how gold and silver works as a currency legally right now in the U.S., would love to put that all out there. But anyways, from my understanding of it, there's only a couple states that allow it as a legal currency, and so we don't currently accept that here for our businesses, but hopefully one day that'll change. And I think that you'll find that a lot of businesses would be willing to accept a silver coin. And I always hear the argument, well, unless you're a metallurgy expert, you're not going to know how to check and see if it's counterfeit or not. You have the same problem with counterfeit dollars already, so that's nothing new. And silver and gold is much easier to determine if it's real than a $20 bill, $100 bill. It's substantially easier to determine if it's real. It's usually just a small chemical test that you can buy for like 12 bucks on Amazon. I mean, it is not a hard thing. So that concept of it, being able to not do it because of those reasons, I always thought was a joke. That's kind of the more, and I like Dave Ramsey, so don't get me wrong, but that's kind of the Dave Ramsey concept of it, which I think is poor analysis. But I digress a little bit here. So we've got this freedom convoy. We've got, so we can prepare a little bit by having other currencies and getting our money out of the system. We can also prepare a little bit by getting some food and some of those bare essentials that we need to push through those harder times. We can do that and actually have those in stock. What am I talking about? Well, right now we're seeing hog prices up about $60 per head. And what is happening is people are deciding it's too hard to maintain with the regulations, the labor shortages, and the prices, that they're just getting out of the hog industry and getting out of the farrowing portion of the hogs. Raising the hogs is the easy part, right? That's what we do. We no longer farrow hogs. So if you don't know, farrowing is breeding the hogs. It's what it's called when hogs have a litter of piglets. That's called farrowing. And so that price, because there's less hogs being farrowed every year, the price for the hogs is going up, and we're seeing about a $60 increase per head. That's going to make its way into the grocery stores, and so a large hog, a 300-pound hog, is going to return some roughly 150 pounds of meat back to the at the retail cut end, depending on how the meat is cut up, and that can vary anywhere in there. But let's just say, for sake of argument, about 150 pounds, be a little bit more than that. But anyway, so your 150 pounds of meat now has $60 added to it. So we're adding about, what, 40, 45 cents a pound to the price of our meat at the retail cut at the end of the day. So that's how that comes back to affect you. So what can you do now? Well, for one, you can go ahead and lock in your price with a local farmer, right? When we set people up, we lock in their price. Even if we lose money at the end of the year because the prices of grain have gone up, we lock in price, which is actually why today Amanda Lynn and I are going to get a big grain bin. We're going to do a whole separate video on that to show you guys how to do this for small farms. But we'll do that video probably tomorrow or Thursday. We'll have that released to show you all about this grain bin. But so if you're interested in hog farming at all, or even for cattle, this is a great option. Goats as well. So we'll go over this with you guys. Now, the hog prices, if you get them with a local farmer, you can lock in your hog and your beef prices prior to actually receiving the meat. So you lock it in at prices now. Food is only going up. It's a great investment. The other aspect to that is that the local producer, because you're cutting out all the middlemen in there, it's going to be drastically cheaper, right? So when we sell a hog, if we sell a whole hog, that whole hog is going to run you, after processing fees, around $1,100, right? So $1,100, and like I said, you're going to walk away with a minimum of about 150 pounds of meat, probably closer to the 200 pound of meat range, depending on how things work. I think the last hog we butchered, we got like 215 pounds of meat. So for those of you that were saying 150 pounds is wrong, just realize I'm just throwing numbers out there as an estimate to make the math easy. But 220 pounds is what we got off of our last hog. So depends on how you have it cut and everything. But that's a lot of meat that you're getting for $1,100, and that beats any price from the store. Especially if you're doing comparable prices, you're not going to get pasture-raised, non-GMO fed pigs for that price. And so that's what we do. And you can find somebody in your local area that is doing something similar. Hogs and beef are easy to find. Poultry is a little bit harder, and poultry is more expensive on the pasture side of things, just as a general rule. So keep that in mind. But right now is the time to be stocking up your freezer, getting your cryptocurrencies off the server, and making sure you have a little bit of gold and silver in your pocket, some real wealth, some real currency. getting some assets that are actually making you money, things like real estate. We just purchased our mulcher, our skid steer and our mulcher, and we're actually opening up a mulching service here about 4 months in Birmingham, and we'll start offering mulching. We bought a disc mulcher, which moves a lot faster than a rotary mulcher, so we can clear a lot more land in a lot smaller period of time, and we'll be about the only ones actually around here doing it. So everybody else uses a drum mulcher. So we have this big rotary disc mulcher that looks like a big saw wheel with blades on the bottom, cuts everything up. Really cool. We'll be showing you all videos as soon as we get that on farm. Kubota is back ordered right now. It's about three months or so before we see it here. But anyway, so having assets that provide income is an inflation hedge. And the reason that it hedges against inflation is because you can raise your prices as inflation goes up, and it's a constant money flowing thing rather than having money stored in something. And so that's what we want to be looking at. That's why I like rental properties if you feel like dealing with the headache. So even though now is not necessarily the best time to buy properties, on a long-term scale, it doesn't really matter when you purchase the property. So that's one thing that people always forget, is they say, well, I want to buy at the bottom of the market. It's like, well, absolutely you do. But over the course of 20 years, it doesn't really matter when you purchase it as long as you don't drastically overpay for it. So pull the comps, then you'll know that, and you'll know what the cash flow is. So guys, anyways, I went a little bit longer than I wanted to on this video, so I'm going to end it right here. We're going to talk more about this here in a couple of videos this week, and then we will have the grain bin coming in. This is a mobile grain bin. We're going to show you how to do this with your hogs, with your cows, with your goats, whatever animals you want, chickens even, and we'll show you how to do this. This is a really inexpensive way to store a lot of feed and have good access to it. So we'll have that all out to you. I really appreciate y'all watching.